Ken Hullett, thank you so much for coming in.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So this is really exciting to me, Ken. Is this the first graduating cohort?
Yes, it is.
You guys are the first.
We are, yeah.
It's amazing. So let's just fill in our audience. UCSC has one of the few PhD programs in game design in the United States. One of the only ones in the United States. There might be a couple other ones. There's only a couple more around the world. And y'all are embarking on a whole new space and time continuum.
Yeah, we are. It's not, technically a PhD is not in game design. I'm a computer science PhD student, but the Games and Playable Media group includes PhDs in computer science, people getting their MFAs in digital arts and new media, and then also the bachelor's degree, the major in game design is an undergrad major.
And this is all under the computer science department.
DANM is under arts and computer science.
That's right. Yeah. But the PhD program is under the computer science department.
Yes.
And this was something that was was done, spearheaded by Jim Whitehead, who is your advisor, right?
That's right.
For your PhD.
That's right.
And I had a great pleasure of talking with him. He was my first Gamers on Game interview.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
yeah.
It was wonderful. And so Jim started doing this about 10 years ago. And how long have you been in the... he started getting the program together, but the PhD program is now, like I said, the first cohort, the first group of students are graduating with their PhDs in this department.
Right. Yeah. This is my seventh year, the whole game design program, both for undergrads and grads, kind of started about my second year here.
Oh, I see.
Right. So actually, when I came here, it didn't exist at that point.
Other than in Jim's head.
The plans were there.
He was making it happen. He was doing the Wizard of Oz thing behind the scenes, setting it up. And so it's been the last 5 years that you have seen. Then they've already had the first BS group of students graduate.
Yeah, we've graduated several classes of undergrads.
More than that. Yeah. More than that?
Yeah. I think the first graduating class for undergrads in game design was probably 2007.
Mm-hmm. And then you had your first award ceremony for the undergraduates who are graduating, the Sammies.
Right,
and
last year.
And this year will be the second one.
Yeah.
And it's going to be at the Rio. So the venue was a little small last year, and they decided to open it up.
Yeah. There was more popular than they expected. So it'll be in a bigger venue this year.
Okay, Ken, let's just talk about you, okay? So you are doing your research on level design.
That's right.
And so this is mostly with, obviously, electronic games.
Right.
Video games.
Computer games. Digital games.
Yeah. And when we talk about level design, we're talking about different levels in which the game, you can go to the next level. You get a certain number of points and you get to go to the next level, right? Right.
Well, level can mean different things for different games. For a lot of games, it's a way to segment the gameplay. A player plays one level and they get to the end. That signals their advancement to the next level and continuing through the game. The particular domain I'm looking at is first-person shooters, which has a very historical connection to level design, where levels are very much crafted by level designers. They're artists. They come in, they build the levels, they position items, they position enemies, they do programming of enemy behavior, with the intent of creating a gameplay experience for the player. So it's very much a crafted, sort of hands-on, designed approach, whereas maybe in other games, level design is much more straightforward.
Right. And then, so you yourself are working on the player's behavior within these different levels.
Right. I'm looking at how players play game, basically, and how that's affected by the level design and how the designers can use that level design in order to craft gameplay and create player behavior. So we're looking at those connections between the way the level is built by the designer and what their intent is in terms of gameplay and how that actually plays out when the players play the game.
And then the actual gameplay.
Right.
So, for instance, just in a really silly way, let's say you put in a room that's a dead end, you can't get out of it, and you have an enemy in there, and every time you go in there, you die, and you can't get to the next level. That would cause quite a bit of dissatisfaction, and that player would probably not want to go back in that room.
The player would be unhappy, and in terms of the effect on gameplay, it would slow down the pace of the game. Players would have to kind of explore and figure out that it's a dead end before going back out. So a designer might actually put a dead end in a level as a way to signal that the player's gone off the main track, or just to kind of confound the player in some way. But yeah, like that thing you described would probably not be a very good level design.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really fascinating what you're working with, Ken Hullett, is what comes first, the game. Okay, so you have the level designer, and you're watching. There's almost a psychology to how this.
It's very much about psychology.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to lead up to.
Yeah.
So you have the psychology of the level designer, and then you have the player who's now negotiating and navigating through this level, and how they're behaving, and that kind of their psychology.
Right. So part of the designer's art is anticipating the player's actions, what they're going to do, how they're going to react to the level. So most level designers, of course, gamers themselves. They've played a lot of games. That's where they're drawing their inspiration for levels is other things they've seen, other things they've played, and knowing how they reacted. So that's one of the things that helps them craft that gameplay experience for the player.
Right. And then you're watching then how that player navigates. Right.
Well, navigation's part of it. We're looking at the data that's collected. In our version of the Half-Life 2 engine, we're collecting all this data and looking at things like the player's path, how much they're exploring, their combat actions, how close or far away they are from enemies, what sort of weapons they're using, how accurate they are with the weapons. So that's one part of it. The other part is looking at the videos and doing content analysis and saying, the player's being aggressive in this point, making these more subjective evaluations. The player's being aggressive, the player's being defensive, the player's running away, the player's overpowering the enemies. So we're making these qualitative judgments and looking at sort of the overall trends there. And between those qualitative evaluations and the quantitative results from the data analysis, we can say something about the level design. And in our case, we're tying it back to design patterns within the levels and creating a tool for designers so that when they want to craft gameplay, if they want to create a certain effect, they can look at our pattern collection and see which patterns to use to create the kind of effect they're looking for.
So you're going to give this information out to game level designers?
Yes.
That's part of the goal.
Yeah, it's part of the goal. I mean, currently the pattern collection's on our website, ldp.soe.ucsc.edu, and when I have the results all together, I'm still writing my dissertation. When I have everything together, I'll put all that up on the website.
And now, one of the questions I have for you, Ken Hullett, and you are listening to Gamers on Game at KZSC Santa Cruz, is you used the Half-Life game engine.
That's right.
Which comes pretty well equipped with what the scene is going to look like and the various types of things you can put in that level.
The engine, it's the Source SDK, which was developed by Valve, and it's used in the Half-Life 2 series of games, which includes like Counter-Strike and Team Fortress 2 and Left 4 Dead. So the basic toolkit you can download for free. You can get it through Steam. And it comes with lots of textures, lots of sort of pre-made prefabs that you can drop into levels. So if you just want to make a level that looks a lot like Half-Life 2, it's very straightforward. And that's what we did in our project.
It's free.
It's free. It's completely
open
free.
Source? No.
I'm not sure it's classified as open source. You can get the source code and make changes. I'm not sure if it's actually classified as open source.
But it's free.
It's free.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you, along with your team, and who worked with you on this?
Well, besides my advisors and the people in my committee, I've had several undergrads working with me doing various things like helping to explore design patterns in games, helping to build the levels that were used in the user study, and helping to run the user tests. And
so who did you get to be the users?
I just put up ads around campus and recruited from the undergrad game design major. A lot of people came from that, but I also had other people from other parts of the university.
How big was your user group?
We had 39 participants total.
39 participants, and how often did they play the levels?
So they came in for one session. It took about 30 minutes on average. There were 5 levels that each participant played. And it took about 30 minutes total to do the whole thing. So
cool.
Yeah.
And so, Ken, tell me, was there anything like really outside of your imagination of results? Like, did you get really like, whoa, I didn't expect that?
No, not so much in the full study. I did a pilot study initially with about 10 participants, and I was surprised at how difficult the levels were, because building levels and working with the undergrads, we kind of lost sight of the difficulty, and we made the levels much too difficult. So between that's one of the reasons to do the pilot study is to find these problems, and so I made them much easier for the final study. And so most participants were able to get through it rather quickly.
Right. And there was 5 levels they had to go through.
There's 5 levels, yeah.
Right, so you had like 6 minutes each.
There was no time limit. I scheduled about an hour block for each participant. But most did finish in about 30 minutes. So it took them about 5-6 minutes each. Each level, yeah.
And so was there anything like you knew that was going to be the way the players behaved? Did you have some intuitive design elements that did play out, that people were able to navigate around or play through, or it was?
It'd be hard to explain without going into a whole lot of detail, but we're looking at specific design patterns, and had theory about how it's going to affect the pace and the tension of the level. For the most part, things were very close to what we expected. There were some patterns that the gameplay wasn't exactly what we expected. Like there was an enemy sniper location where we expected the player to use cover a lot and sort of advance slowly to engage the enemies, but most players just charged right in. So it kind of had the opposite effect. Instead of a pattern that slowed down the level and created a challenge for the players, it was actually very fast paced. Everybody just charged right in and were able to engage the enemies very quickly.
So you think maybe it was just 39 really aggressive people that you chose? No, I'm just joking.
Well, we tried to get experienced players. So
right. You want that for sure. Mm-hmm. So Ken Hullett is a PhD candidate in computer science who should be finishing up this June, and you've been doing level design for quite a while. You did this before you got into the...
Yes, I worked in industry. I was a level designer and a producer for several game companies. And
they were educational game companies, one of them?
My first job in the game industry I was a tester for an educational game company. And after I'd been there testing for a few months, it was a small startup. They needed someone to do level design for a game that they were planning. And so they asked me to do it. That game wound up not actually getting published, but it was my first chance to see the development process from the inside and learn about level design. And following that, I was able to... after that project got canceled, I was able to go to Activision, which is a large game publisher, and worked on MechWarrior 2 and was a level designer on that, which was MechWarrior 2 was a pretty well-known game, and I still have encountered students and people who remember MechWarrior 2 and played it when they were kids. So it's I guess it has a legacy. So.
Do you see yourself doing level design after you graduate?
No, currently I'm planning to. I have a job offer as a game design analyst for a social games company. And so I'll be working with the designers and using data to help them improve the designs and be working more on the game design side.
So straight out of your thesis work?
Yes.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Now, what I think is interesting is that you were working in the Augmented Design Lab?
Right,
that was your research group?
Yeah, that's Jim's group, yeah.
And so Augmented Design Lab was where the level design was being researched?
Yes, there's 2 sort of projects in that lab that relate to level design. There's my own, and there's Gillian Smith's research about procedural level generation in platformer games. So we're both working with Jim. He's our advisor, Jim Whitehead. So he came up with that name for our group, and then he has some other students doing. He has another student, Chris Lewis, who's looking at design patterns in social games. So we're all doing work on design and sort of augmenting it through things like procedural generation or analysis of design patterns. So the name seemed to make sense. Yeah.
So it's funny because we were just talking with Jesse Fulton on Artist on Art about data and information art, and you sent me a few images of the data collection of the player behavior within the different levels.
Right.
And it became very artistic looking.
You could say that. So those were screenshots from the Hammer editor. That's the level building tool for the Source SDK. So it's just a top-down view of the level with a lot of the detail turned off. But then I in that tool, I was drawing the player's path over the level, so you could see where the players went. And I think the image I sent you was just like one player, so you could see where he died a couple times, and he finally got through the whole level. I can also have it set it so that it draws all the paths of all the players, so you can see where players went in the level. You could even see, say, where the most traffic is, if there's sections of players didn't go into, if there's an area where players died a lot. So it's a useful tool to visualize the level.
To visualize and to also do the next iterations. If you were going to do something like that, you would be able to make the game change how the behavior is by changing the level, right?
Right. In commercial game development, designers would use tools like that, do user studies, see how players play, and then go back and do another round of revisions on the levels in order to make sure that the levels are sort of up to the quality of standard that they want for their game.
Right. So this is something industry's already been doing in a way.
It's not universally adopted, but
so it's new.
It's a newer thing. Yeah. This whole user research field. Microsoft is very big into it. EA is starting to get into it, but no, it's not universally adopted yet.
And so your research will again be able to inform the other designers out in the industry.
Right.
And do you feel like you're just starting to grasp it? Like there's so much more, like the tip of the iceberg kind of thing? Or is it pretty simple? People play the same, like 99% of our brains are the same anyway, so we're going to be playing video games the same way? Or
I think there's definitely a wide variety of types of players. There's different demographics. So I think it's useful to do this sort of user testing with different types of people. For a lot of commercial games being made these days by big publishers, they fit very nicely into these existing genres. So you can sort of look at one, first-person shooter game or one platformer and speculate about how people are going to play a different one pretty reasonably. As we get into some more into the independent games side, where people are developing very different games, it's a little harder to speculate. So I think the playtesting is going to be helpful for those kind of people as well. Whereas for the big publishers, it's like, oh, this is our next FPS. Like, we kind of know how it went for the last one.
Right.
So they have a starting point.
So they have an experience, history that they can draw upon. But again, you're saying with these independent game designers and game publishers, this is a new way of looking at how to design your games. And so if you have a game that's very different from, let's say it is a first-person shooter, but it's very different from the usual look or feel of it, this type of study and data collection is something that they'll be able to do in-house simply by downloading Half-Life Game Engine and getting a user group kind of thing. Or
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be Half-Life 2. I mean, for any independent game developer, I think it would be a great asset for them to do usability testing, do user testing, because they don't have the resources of the bigger developers. It's quite easy to get a few people, even your friends and family, for the first couple rounds, and then later on, there's plenty of people in the community who are interested and willing to play. And if, like you say, you can do it in a way that it's downloadable, people can play at home, and you can collect the data remotely, you can look at how people are playing and make the adjustments as needed to your game.
That's really cool, Ken. You also like to work, you do level design, obviously, design patterns in games.
Right.
What does that mean?
Okay, so design patterns are ways of formalizing approaches in a field. Like there's design patterns in architecture, design patterns in software engineering. There's a field, there's something you want to build, there's various ways to approach it. So if we can formalize what these different approaches are and look at the way they're used, then that's a tool for designers working in that field. So for level design specifically, we've been looking at design patterns, mainly in first-person shooter levels. So what are these sort of common approaches, common features that appear in levels? So for a first-person shooter game, one thing that's very common would be, say, a sniper location. That's an area in a level where either the player or the enemy is a sniper, or they have this area that overlooks another area, and they have access to a sniper weapon, a high-powered weapon. That's going to, when a designer puts something like that in a level, there's a specific intent of gameplay that they're trying to create. So if it's the player that's a sniper, it's going to slow down the pace of the level. It's going to reduce the tension and challenge of the level. It's going to give the player a chance to basically rest and use this, long-range weapon in order to engage enemies and be fairly protected in the sniper location. Another example of pattern would be a choke point. So if there's sort of a narrow area where enemies are getting funneled through, it's going to create a high, energy combat situation. It's going to increase the pace of the level. The player is going to be have to sort of engage all these enemies very quickly. It's going to create this, very high energy situation. So those are two examples of patterns with, a gameplay intent. So if a designer wants to create that sort of effect, they might use these patterns. So
right.
Players or designers are already using these implicitly. They played lots of games. They've seen these patterns, but we've been going through levels and identifying these patterns and writing up these formal descriptions of what they are and how designers can use them in order to create certain types of gameplay.
Where would I find that, Ken?
That's on my website, the Level Design Patterns website, which is ldp.soe.ucsc.edu.
And then we have a couple more things you worked on. Game data analysis,
right.
Which is...
So this all ties back to my thesis. Like my dissertation, what we've been talking about is kind of ties together my work on level design and design patterns and game data analysis.
And then you have player modeling.
Right. So I've done some work in player modeling, not so much recently.
Are you modeling the player, or is the play...
We're looking at, trying to understand... Player modeling is a very broad field. I collaborated with some people in my lab on a paper to create a taxonomy of player modeling approaches, since it is this very broad and poorly defined idea. So different types of player modeling are, can we figure out what types of players are and use that for, say, automated testing or something? Can we figure out different types of players and, design games for those different types of players?
Right.
So that's... And, we found that there were lots of different people doing things that they were calling player modeling or experience modeling, and we just wanted to explain what they all were and compare them and contrast them in a taxonomy we came up with. Then I did some player modeling work when I was a visiting PhD student at ITU Copenhagen, looking at data from a very simple game where the player just navigates around a 3D maze and has to pick up treasures and avoid these enemies. So we're looking for what the different types of players were in that type of game. And there are some players who were very aggressive and would get close to the enemies, and players who would always run away from the enemies. And there are players that would always go after the treasures without regard to the enemies. There are players that were very intent on exploring the whole level. So we were able to define these different classes of players.
Right on. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Ken, for coming on to Gamers on Game. We've come to the end, unfortunately. But thank you for your work and for coming on and talking about it. I really appreciate it. And please stay tuned for Dream Scream. Ken, congratulations once again, PhD student in game.
Thank you very much.
Computer science, but game design.
Yes.
You rock, Ken. Hey, everybody, stay tuned, and thanks for listening to Gamers on Game.